Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of In Other Words with Danielle and Zara.
This is a podcast where we talk about a wide variety of different subjects, from boundaries to fun things to do on a budget. So, in other words, we talk about all the things.
Okay, so today I'm very, very excited. You will hear a little less of Danielle and I, so congratulations. We have a special guest with us today, and she's going to be just telling us a little bit about her life story. She's an incredible woman, and specifically focusing on human trafficking. So we're going to be chatting a bit about that. So, Christel, you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I come from the little town of Maritzburg, Pietermaritzburg, and I lived there most of my life until I started all my adventures overseas. And I actually had quite a free spirit. I just wanted to go overseas, so I did that as soon as I had earned enough money to. I did a bit of studies, and then I went and took care of older people, and that started that bug of wanting to travel. So I got married early, and I was in a relationship with my now ex-husband for 13 years. And so that relationship, unfortunately didn't work out as I'd wanted. And so from then on, I thought, I need to go and make some money for myself. And I worked on a motor yacht for 14 months and made myself $31,000 US.
Pretty nice.
Yeah. And basically, I was glorified maid, but it was a stewardessing position.
Okay.
But such a great experience. I saw a bit of, obviously, the Caribbean. I saw the Virgin Islands, the Bahamas. And with that money, after I'd had that experience, I really felt like God had done so much in my life. And so I wanted to share that. I wanted to give back. And so I used those dollars to then go on a course it's called the DTS, Discipleship Training School, and it's with YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission. And because I had US dollars, I thought, great place to go and use these dollars, and
Yes.
I can just give back to people. And so I did that in LA. And after my mission trips with them, I then decided one of those trips was with a group of ladies that went to Thailand. And after speaking to the girls in the bars, that's when I realized how they felt like nothing, and how their lives as women was so similar in a way to how I felt my life had made me feel, which was less than, second best. Because I'm a woman, I'm not as valuable as a man. And so I decided, after I'd been there for 2 years with YWAM in Los Angeles, I felt like I really wanted to go and make a difference to the girls' lives in Thailand. So I sold up, I had a motorbike, so I sold that. And I sold my possessions, had a big garage sale, and off I went. And left a few boxes with my parents, just a bit of Tupperware, etc., that you do, that I thought I might just need again one day, and my microwave. And then off I went. And that was my first start of experiencing what human trafficking does in Thailand and what the girls go through. And that was in 2005 that I actually took off in January. And that started my knowledge and learning and empathizing and walking a journey with these girls that I thoroughly loved.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions. The first is, do you maybe just want to explain to the people what human trafficking is, what it looks like? What does it mean to be trafficked?
Yeah. So the big thing with trafficking and how you can notice whether trafficking is taking place is when a person is forced to do something or encouraged to do something through deception. So it's a deception to get someone to do work of some sort to make money for someone else to get the profit. So that's what human trafficking is in a very simple form. So there's always deception involved, and there's money exchange for the person, and the person who's being trafficked is there because they are actually working for someone who's benefiting from their labor.
Yes. Do you want to go?
Yeah. So when it comes to human trafficking, like, who are the most common victims usually? Like, yeah, who are the girls or who are the people who are most likely to be trafficked?
That's a good question. It's usually those that are younger, so they usually are under 18, and a big reason for this is because they're vulnerable. They haven't yet understood the badness of the world, and also they target those that are in vulnerable positions, like they'll watch for people, young children at bus stops or at shopping malls that are looking lost, looking aimless. They've got that look about them that says, I don't really have good relationships with people, I'm a loner. And then they also target certain cultures.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say certain cultures, why is that, or where do you see that most prominently?
You see it in third world countries, villages, and places where the culture is very similar to oppression, where they are used to their value being undermined in some way through the culture. So there's differences between classes and sexes.
Okay. And then what are these trafficked victims sold for? So you said that there's usually the case they're owned by someone and that person is gaining from them. So what types of trafficking is there? What are the victims used for?
Also a very good question because it's very broad. So the most common ones that people see is labor trafficking. That's what a lot of countries have now focused on, is labor trafficking. One of the less common ones is the organ trafficking, where it's very underground, it's very hidden, because it seems like something that could be quite natural in a hospital, or somebody suddenly goes missing and they sell those organs to someone. So
That's crazy.
and then child soldiering, so it's child soldiers. That's usually in northern African countries, a lot of that in Israel, and obviously the sex trafficking. Those are the most common ones that one would see.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to me, like, in Thailand, because the sex industry there is so huge, and like I wrote an essay about it last year about the sex tourism in Thailand and how so many Western tourists go to Thailand, especially men, to go and have sex with the Thai girls there. And it's just horrifying to think of how many girls are have been trafficked, not doing it, not consensually at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's terrifying.
Why do you think a man from a Western world would travel all across the world to go and, buy or take advantage of an Asian?
That is a very good question, and because a lot of the men there are married that come across. A lot of them also, what I experienced from listening to the men in the coffee shops and restaurants, etc. The type of men are usually men that are looking for a woman to please them or serve them, and their idea of what a woman is there for is usually to serve a man, because he believes that the fact that women are less valuable than men, that women have a role, and that role is clearly to be to serve a man to be there for her husband. And very often in the Western cultures, this doesn't happen that often, because the attitude of a woman is different. It's it's equalized somewhat.
Yes. Well, we're trying.
We're trying, exactly, through good things like this even.
Yes.
The other thing that was also quite surprising was that some men, fathers, would bring their sons to have their first sexual experience if they thought that their son was not, if he didn't show much interest in girls. And as a father, they thought, oh, I want to give my son an experience. So they take him over as like, we're going on a holiday, and that's what the son would be experiencing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's awful.
Yeah.
And it's also just a level of fetishization, I think, of Asian women, which is quite sad. Anyway, okay, so is it the suspects? Okay.
Yeah.
Who are the most likely suspects? Like, what can we look out for? Like, what could you look out for to see who would be the kind of people to traffic people?
Yeah.
I would say for the majority of men that are looking for women to abduct for trafficking, or children to abduct for trafficking, they definitely have a profile, and that profile is, I guess, what you're wanting to have an outlay of. So the profile is usually someone that is looking for affirmation, somebody that feels like they are not fitting into society. They normally look for someone that is very shy and doesn't communicate very well with people. So, for example, a child that is wandering around in a village that is, sort of kicking stones while his friends are playing, that would be a good target. He would be a good target for like child laboring, labor, because they would then, just take the child and, oh dear, the parents just think my child has got lost somewhere. They may call him, but he's gone. For women, they are looking for women that, girls, teenage girls, that look like they are also looking for affirmation. Ones that might be very attractive, but look as if they're walking alone. Ones that are easy to grab because they're not with a group of friends. And they have this look about them that says, I'm a nobody, nobody loves me. Or they could have that look about them that is a little bit confident, but they give off that vibe that as soon as you look at them, they'll kind of look down. And the only reason why I'm giving these little examples is because the commonality between all of the targets and the profile that they're looking for is someone that could be easily snatched without or convinced, someone that is vulnerable emotionally. And because they could then be easily convinced to hop into a car or be promised amazing modeling jobs. This also happens where there's a man at, say, a mall or in the street that would see you walking and would say, hey, you look like somebody that would do well overseas. I think you look so beautiful, you're gorgeous. Have you ever contemplated doing modeling? And then that's how the conversation would go. And I even got hoodwinked into that, and God's miraculously saved me in London from that. I was very naive, and when I first went traveling and looking after those old ladies, and it was a man that was wearing chains and looked like a pretty smooth guy, but when he approached me, he said, oh, what country do you come from? And I was looking lost. I was on my own. I was standing in this long line. waiting for Phantom of the Opera, and he approached me. He said to me, "Come, I've got to show you all my photographs and videos." Long story short, I was in his apartment.
Oh my goodness.
And that's when when he started putting on the videos and dancing with me. I looked at the videos, and more of it was all scantily clothed ladies. And
Oh my goodness.
And then that's when I let him come a little bit close, so that I could then duck out, and it was all in it. Oh yeah, it was
Terrifying.
It was terrifying, but I only realized that was trafficking once I was up. I hadn't told my parents the story. I hadn't told anybody because I felt so ashamed that I could be so stupid to actually walk off with someone, a stranger.
Yes.
But I was naive. I had that look. I wasn't very confident, and I just wanted an adventure. I was keen to just, see if somebody could actually give me a job that I could earn money and be a somebody in this world.
Yes.
So I was 19.
Sure. And who are they? So is it, because I often, when I think of traffickers, I think like drug lords or syndicates. Like, who are the people or the organizations that are trafficking and running this?
Yeah. Did you get exposed to them like that? Or,
So they are various syndicates, as you said, that have a number of, for lack of a better word, minions that work for them.
Okay.
And so in Thailand, the minions were the bar managers, and they were usually females. So the trafficker would then employ...
Makes me feel even worse.
Yeah. He would employ a bar manageress, and she would then manage the girls. And when a man would come and take the girl for the night, he would have to pay the bar manageress for the night. And if he wanted to take her for more than one night, he would have to bring her back by 4 o'clock the next day to report back. And then if she didn't, then she lost her job. So that's how the sex trafficking in Thailand worked. So the minion there was the bar manageress. Very often with labouring, it's a company. So they would target, the syndicate would target a certain company that employs, construction workers or farm labourers, where the little boys would be hoeing and cutting down things, chopping things. In China, for example, a lot of clothing is made in China.
Yep.
And where those, and in Thailand, and some of Korea, all of these countries where, earning money is a big thing. It looks like a lot of money, but for the parents then, when they sell the children for various reasons, they get offered an education, for example. The traffickers would say to the parents, here, we'll give you money for your child because we'll give him a good education, but we know that you're going to be losing an income because your child's working in the rice fields, or your child's working in your shop. So that's specific traffickers that would target, would be they in areas where there's farmlands. The construction workers, they would organize and approach construction companies. Restaurants, they would employ, they would be the syndicates that then would approach a Korean restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, a Thai restaurant, an Indian restaurant, and they would then do the child labor trafficking through that, and sex trafficking. And in Thailand, I know, and in China, I know that there's children that are specifically trafficked and groomed for sex trafficking for men that want underage children, so under
Sickening.
12.
What would you say, how does, because something I've always been fascinated in is just the whole grooming process, and even a woman who's trafficked and then works as a prostitute, but their goal isn't necessarily to get out of it. I mean, I think they'd love to, but it's also, this is my livelihood, or this is how I stay alive. How does that happen?
It starts off from what I've heard from the girls. This is in Thailand particularly that I know. They are actually, if they are underage, so one of our youngest girls, she was 11. And the way that the trafficker got her and trafficked her into the bar was that she ran away from her parents and from her sister's household because they wouldn't believe her that her brother-in-law was actually raping her. So she was brave enough to tell her sister after a year. So this was happening from when she was just 10. And so she was brave enough to tell her sister, and her sister didn't believe her. So she ran away because the family were now, the sister then told the parents, how can she say this? This is terrible. And she then left home because she felt shame. And the Thai culture is very much a shame-based culture. So you do anything possible to not be shamed. So she ran away, and she was found then by someone on the street that then said, I know somebody who can find you a job. And then that's where she started in a restaurant. And at that restaurant, this man who found her on the street was particularly looking for women, young girls just like her, because he was one of the minions to find somebody on the street. And so, he then made her work in this restaurant. And after a couple of weeks, she was then raped by the restaurant owner, because he was the one responsible for actually derailing her, in a sense, to make her boundaries be completely violated. So she was already violated by her brother-in-law, and so this, it's like a whole aura that she probably had about her, that she was vulnerable, she was weak. And so then in the bars, he eventually brought her to a bar, and that's where she was trafficked again by the bar owner. So he bought her from this restaurant owner. So they all are in syndicates with each other and all get money out of it. And our rescue team from Destiny Rescue, they actually rescued her in one of the bars and brought her, and she that was then given a number, and it was actually her cousin that was still in contact with her, and she actually gave her the details of being able to phone this number, because she didn't know when our rescue teams went into the bar, she got to speak to one of our rescue teams, but the number that she was given, she wasn't sure whether, this was going to be another bad experience. So she told her cousin about it, and the cousin said, no, it's worth a try and go. So, in the home, we would then pay them a salary so that they weren't losing out on money, and also we'd give them schooling.
Sure. Okay, so then the next question I wanted to ask, because it just fascinates me, like you said, is the owner would kind of just break her down further. Do you think in these different sects or groups where people are trafficked, do you think that a huge weapon is just this idea of making them feel as worthless or as stuck as possible? What experiences did you hear from the girls that you ended up working with?
So the main one was that they were raped, or otherwise, if they were a little bit more confident, then they would also give physical abuse, just to make them feel like a nothing, and make them almost feel like a dominated and controlled. So that was a huge thing. They never really were good or kind to them, because that is, especially even the bar manageresses, they eventually became very ugly and made the girls feel like a nothing, because they were treated like nothing. So they weren't being paid very much either. So it just made the general atmosphere very bad. But what made the girls stay or feel too afraid to leave is that they didn't know how they were going to survive financially if they left, because the bar owners and the traffickers indirectly wouldn't pay them, that would pay them a salary which was like 2,000 baht a month, which is like 1,000 rand a month. So it wouldn't be a lot for them to live on. So that the accommodation that they were staying in was provided by the bar, and every girl that worked in the bar was basically a waitress for that bar, and she had to sleep with a certain number of men every month in order
Sure.
to maintain her salary.
Sure.
So everything was dominated by fear and by money. So if the thought of running away or going somewhere is like, I don't know where I'm going to go,
Yeah.
and then it's going to be too shameful for me to say why I don't know where I am, I don't know where my family is, I've got no money, I'm going to have to explain all of that, and it's too shameful. So it's shame that kept them back in Thailand. In the other countries, it would probably be whatever is very respectful in their culture. They would make sure that that also they dominated them and brought them down into nothing, feeling inadequate, feeling vulnerable, feeling lost. And they also, another tactic is that they take them out of their familiar environment. So in the villages, they would bring them to the big city where they don't know where they are. And they can't escape because they don't even know telephone numbers. They don't know anything. And they take them away from their relatives, so they already feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I remember, because we chatted and we had coffee not too long ago,
Yes.
and you spoke about helping the LAPD kind of find the places that were almost disguised or as something else, but it was actually behind the scenes, was all about trafficking. How do you go about spotting those places? What does that generally look like in different countries, etc.?
So usually the thing that one looks for is that it's for where there's trafficking taking place, it's like a front. So the front would be like a nail bar, and or a restaurant or a massage parlor. So those three were the most common. And so the front would look like a shop. So you do get you do get your nails done, you do get a massage, but either upstairs or behind the actual shop, that's where the girls would stay. And because they don't want the girls to go home or to go anywhere else, so they actually kept locally. So that was one of the things that I was trained to look for, is to see whether, so this nail bar or that restaurant or that massage parlor on this street, just look for us whether there's any back entrance, whether there's any cars going to the back, whether there are lights that come up after 10 o'clock when the massage parlor shuts, or when the nail bar closes, or when the restaurant shuts. Are there lights that automatically come on? How big is the premises? Those type of questions. Also, are there any girls jumping into the cars of any of the clients or the restaurant people, the people that are coming to eat, so that we could keep a record of that. And the way we do that is we'd find a McDonald's or a coffee shop or a restaurant that was kind of within eye shot of this place. And in the States especially, it was quite common to have a coffee shop or a McDonald's or something in a busy area.
So these places were in
Normal
in normal
places.
places. It wasn't
In the
just
shadows.
hidden far
No,
away.
No. It would be in kind of like a middle class area.
Yes, so that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
So it's not in your fancy areas, but in a middle class area. And in LA, it was where it's common for Chinese or Korean restaurants or Thai restaurants, and it's also quite common for them to have a nail bar that doesn't have all the glitz and the glamour, but it's just a simple place. And then with that simplicity comes cheaper rent, and it's for large spaces where the girls could be accommodated. And, there'd be like 6 girls in one room, and all just sleeping on mattresses because that's what they're used to. In India, especially, that was horrific with our organization that also did the rescues in India, they would all just be sleeping like next to each other on mattresses, and some of them were even chained to each other so that it would be more difficult for them to actually leave. So they make their living conditions very just bearable, but at the same time, the fear that's in them, and also the fear of not having any money and survival, how they're going to survive when they don't have a job, they don't know where they are, all of that. So, yeah, for the LAPD, we did the reporting, and because I was doing the heading up the Justice Department for YWAM in LA, I then would sit with someone across the way, and then they would be taking notes on their cell phones. So it would look like we're just having a normal conversation, but I'd be watching and saying, this car's just arrived, that car's left.
Sure.
And then after 3 months, the police would then know whether they've got enough evidence to do a raid.
Wow.
One thing I wanted to ask, and I can't remember if you've said this already, but I remember seeing in movies like Taken, like when girls are taken, they often hook them on drugs so that if they leave, they become dependent on drugs and they can't just leave. Is that something that you saw a lot in your work, or what?
In Thailand, I didn't see that because the type of girls we were working with were more the teenagers.
Okay.
And there was no need to actually hook them on drugs because they could dominate them and control them because they were their mindsets were still vulnerable.
Yes.
However, in the strip bars and where they were usually a bit older and more aware of themselves, aware of how to strip, and they were now fully into it. That was, in those bars, actually, that was the, sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
That was where the girls were then needing to be dominated and controlled by drugs because they couldn't be controlled by any other means, really. So, yeah, it's dominance, control, deception. And with the drugs for the older girls, especially in the States, that's how they really need to hook them because they get the girls to have underage girls in the States is not as common as it is like in third world countries because it's frowned upon and there's laws necessarily against that. And there's a lot more repercussions for people that in the States that would do that type of thing. So in the third world countries, it's kind of, they turn a blind eye because the bribes with the police force are also a lot more common.
That's what I was going to ask is, to what extent have you seen like corruption in that regard, like authorities being in on it, or even like with the organ trafficking? Are there doctors involved?
Yeah.
Like these are things
Yes. Yeah. There are, and that's a very good question because everybody they've got to have somebody in the higher places.
Yes.
And so that's where bribery and corruption is very rampant. And when I came back from Thailand in 2011, there was a syndicate that was in charge of bringing a big crate to the Durban harbour that the police had found. But it had Thai kids in it.
Sure.
And so they wanted somebody that could speak Thai. And one of the organizations here in Maritzburg knew that I could interpret Thai to a large extent. And so they contacted me and asked me whether I would go to the detective unit in Church Street and please come and help them because they had 4 girls that they had also got hold of, and they wanted to have them questioned, but they couldn't speak English very well, and they wanted to find out if the syndicate that they were suspected of working under, whether they were the same syndicate that was responsible for bringing this crate into Durban.
Sure.
And so it was a Thursday evening that they phoned, and in order for them to get a professional translator, from Johannesburg, it would have taken too long because they wanted, and it was very expensive, they wanted to release these children. They didn't want to keep them their condition
Yeah.
until they had enough proof. So, I did some translating for these girls, and that's when I found out that how the detective force and for the here in Pietermaritzburg even, what an excellent job they did with the questioning, and then also how they said to me, the 4 people that you see in this room, those are the only 4 people that you trust. You don't trust anybody else. When you walk out here, you don't speak to anybody, you don't make eye contact with anybody, don't let anybody know why you're here. They asked also, have you spoken to anybody when you came in here? Because they don't trust their own kind.
Sure.
That's
Because
so
they don't know
scary.
who's been bribed with
Yeah.
money. Once again, money's involved.
Sure.
Did you ever feel quite threatened
Yeah.
in your line of work? Because I mean, it sounds like it was quite dangerous, and if someone found out what you were doing, that you could have been in a lot of trouble. So did you ever come across dangerous situations, like to your own well-being, or yeah?
In Thailand, I didn't, because in Thailand there's that belief that that the type of Buddhism that they practice is called Theravada Buddhism, and with that belief there's this unwritten law that says for a girl to make her best merit for her next life and come back as something better in her next life, she needs to provide financially for her family until the age of 25. So there's such a demand on these girls to come back as something better, so to make their merit by earning a living and sending money home to their parents. So because of this unwritten law, there's always so many girls that if one girl leaves, there'll be another one that they can find tomorrow. You know, there's and the traffickers, they open more and more bars through using minions, and they pay them a salary, and therefore they say, okay, do you know, this is another method that I didn't mention, is they'll use relatives. So they'll find a bar owner, a bar manageress, should I say. So a bar owner will find a bar manageress, and that bar owner is actually like a trafficker. So he operates on the same thing, where that the woman that's working for them as a bar manageress, they'll ask her, do you have any relatives? Do you have any nieces or nephews that you could bring in to work for us? And they'll pay her per girl. So she, even though she's a relative, she will actually sell her own nephew or niece. Now the nephews will get used for a lot of the underage trafficking that happens in the bars for people that want specifically boys. And that does happen. And that was very sad, because they're one of the bars in Pattaya where this is very popular. There's a lot of transvestites in Pattaya, and he/she's that are, they're not homosexuals, but they get sold into this type of thing at a young age, and that's where they are already then broken in to this type of lifestyle, where they are there specifically for men. And at a young age of 6 years old, one bar was advertising 6 years old as we were walking down.
Sure.
And so there's no age restriction for them, basically.
Sure. And with regards, so you said you never felt threatened in Thailand.
In the States was a different story.
Okay, so what was the case in the States?
Yeah, so in the States, what I did at night through another organization that was in the LA area, it was lovely, but the Dream Center is one of the ones that we go out in a group, and there the whole atmosphere was very different, because there were pimps all the time watching. So it was different to Thailand, where everything happened in a bar, and the girls were basically bought through the Thai manageress of the bar. But in the States, it was the pimp was standing around watching as if he was just a passerby. But you could see by the way that what we would do is we'd give the girls roses, and we'd give them like nicely wrapped toiletries in a nice bag and stuff. And before we could actually do that, we'd have to build some form of strike up some form of conversation with them. And that's where the danger came in, because the pimp would immediately recognize if us as, foreign girls, we come and we try and talk to these girls, and we're not dressed all scantily as if we are, ladies of the night. So that's where I felt a bit like, sure, that the pimp could follow me to my car or follow us to the bus, but that's where we all worked in groups. So there would always be like 3 of us at a time, so it wasn't too intimidating, but the rest would be sort of standing on the outskirts. They'd be praying, but they'd be looking, sort of be standing at a club that was, close enough, and they'd just be hanging out and sort of looking at it as if they debating, should they go in, shouldn't they go in, but all the time one of them is watching us. And then if this happened one time where the girl that I was actually talking to, her pimp actually was walking as if he was approaching me, and one of the ladies actually just came and she said, "Hey," and she shouted my name, and she said, "You better, hey, come quickly, let's go. I think we can get into the club now," made it sort of deterred, and made it as if, okay, it's time for me to go now. So from that aspect, we were all looking out for each other, but the whole atmosphere in the States was very, very different to Thailand. So,
And so you've mentioned that you've had to work just a little bit for the police force in South Africa, and help them with translating. Have you had any more, have you had to do anything else with human trafficking in South Africa, or was that mostly in the US and Thailand?
Yeah, sadly no, because I went back again in 2014, and although I followed up with the detective in, as to what happened, it was a good outcome.
Okay.
But that was in 2011, towards the end of 2011. And then before I went back again in 2014, there was nothing that, they didn't approach me again. And usually, as he said this doesn't happen very often, because it took them 3 years to finally get to this stage and be able to arrest these guys and release the kids. But what the lady that I did the interpreting for, they actually offered her a job, an undercover job, because she'd been in the country for 2 years, and she'd been in Joburg. And what they do is they usually start in Joburg, then they make their way down, and they drop off girls in certain areas, and then they rotate them. And here in Maritzburg, there were 4 different areas where human trafficking is taking place, in 4 different houses in different areas. And they knew where these areas were, but that's why they could ask this girl specific questions. And so for her now, she would have to, she needed to be very well protected. She had no visa because she'd been here for 2 years, and her trafficker had her passport in Joburg. And this is what they do. They keep the passport. When I asked her, "Where's your passport?" because that's always one of the leading questions for if somebody's been trafficked, they don't have their passport. Their passport is sitting safely with a friend in Johannesburg. So that's how their stories always go. They're visiting friends. They came here through visiting the boyfriend. Those were all the things that they answered. And so it takes the police a long time before they can actually do a raid or target the syndicates. And the reason why it takes them so long is they have to find enough proof. And these 4 girls, were necessary for them to then find out from the head lady who then they questioned via me. For her, she actually led them to all the people that were on this TV screen that she had to watch, and they asked, "How many times have you seen this man? How many times did he arrive with this lady?" The questioning was incredible. So they'd been watching for a long time, and so they don't just catch these people very easily. It takes years and years of investigation.
So sad.
Yeah. I think I would ask, like, what do we look out for? But also, I think people, like, we talk about places like Thailand, and everyone just assumes it's far away. And it's,
Yeah,
like you
doesn't
said,
happen
there's 4
here.
places in Pietermaritzburg. Pietermaritzburg is not a big place.
No.
So how common is it in South Africa, and what can we, just as ordinary citizens, look out for?
That's an excellent question, because we all can do something, and the main thing is to create awareness, which you guys are doing through this way, to create awareness of what to look out for, which the question you've asked already, and to be very careful of looking out for people, for children or even teenagers, women, in a mall that look like they are lost or looking uncomfortable. And if you look out and you see that a girl is looking uncomfortable or looking afraid, then look around and see whether there's anybody closely following her, even if you need to pull aside to a shop and just stand there and watch. That is one good thing that you can do, because you could actually save her life. If there's somebody, usually these traffickers would be in twos, sort of watching closely. Also, if what has happened in Somerset West, when I was in Somerset West at the time, even I was alerted to this and asked, did you hear about it? And I only heard about it through this friend of mine, and she knew what I was involved in. And this little child had been abducted by somebody in a clothing store. Her mum was walking with her. She was only 4 years old, and she was walking through the shop, but she was taking clothes off the hanger. And next thing, when she looked around, her daughter wasn't there.
Sure.
And by the time she suddenly, she realized that her daughter wasn't there, and she quickly went to the store owner and said, "Have you seen my daughter? Have you seen my daughter?" And I said, "No." They said, "Quickly go and alert the security staff." She did that, and so within a space of 15 minutes, the security staff found a little boy with someone that it looked a bit odd, but she'd been made to look like a boy. They'd already cut her hair, changed her clothes, and changed her. And they offer sweets, they offer anything, to pacify the child. And so they wouldn't sort of be very bold in making it look like a different cultured person that's walking with that person to alert people to this is looking odd, but they actually bribe and pay people that are looking for money. And so they also target, for their minions, if I can call it that, they target people that they know are in poorer areas and are looking for extra money. And are desperate for extra money so that they can do this. So it's being aware. Also, look out for little children that might not be walking very close to their parents, and sort of, if you can, just walk closer by if you've got a passion for this type of thing, because it's necessary to make sure that nobody else could abduct that person. Teenage women, that's also been a common one, where they'll actually force, the one person behind would force that girl out of the mall or through these turning circles, and would hop into the turning circle and then say, "Oh, sorry, you look quite interesting." Talk to her outside once she's come out of the turning circle, and then just say, "Hey, are you interested in the modeling job? Are you interested in a job overseas?" So that's usually what they offer. It's not like the movie Taken was a bit Hollywood
Yeah, definitely.
but
My
the
mom made me watch
concept-
that when I was young to like scare me from going anywhere ever. You'll stay at home.
I can, and it is a little bit more dramatized, but the concept is the same. But they're not going to just haul you away in a car. Maybe in a third world country, but in this country it's very subtle, and usually offering you a job overseas because that's what every
Yes.
young person would like.
So you've mentioned malls quite a few times. So would you say that's where these things happen the most?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the most common place now where they're finding that that's happening because,
Sure.
there's not that many people waiting at bus stations anymore. There's not that many people walking alone anymore because of the safety aspect. And so the safest place seems to be the mall, where there's lots of people, but when these two traffickers working for a syndicate, men or women, it's that they'll use women on women because very often little children have been or teenagers are made to be aware of the men. So where it's offering a job or something, the other person working with them could be a man that kind of says, yeah, you'd be perfect for this job. Or it could be two women, and also offering work for a caring job overseas or pairing. If it's too good to be true, why target? The good question to ask is, why target me?
Yeah.
You know, do it through an agency and a reputable agency.
Yeah.
Okay, for those watching on YouTube, we are so sorry for the lighting situation and also because
A lack of video.
a lack of video for a part of this episode. Things happen and it is what it is.
Yes. Hilton and electricity are not friends, and apparently my Apple iPhone let me down.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Pathetic. Okay, cool. So I think there's nothing much we still have to add. What we'll do is we'll put the hotline, the human trafficking hotline,
That'll be awesome. Thank you.
in our description, and we'll put it out there. So if we recognize something, do we contact that hotline? It's not
Yes,
going to the authorities is
absolutely.
silly,
It'll be
or not silly, but
yeah, you'll be safe, and because it's becoming more and more popular, and the situation for human trafficking, it's really people are a lot more aware of it,
Yeah.
and it's becoming a lot more common. So I think the best would be to phone the human trafficking hotline, and then that way you'll be safe, but you'll also know that something's being done about it.
yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us.
it's
It was
been such
a
lovely
pleasure.
having you. And I think we will be seeing you again. So if you guys loved Christel, don't worry. We're going to have her on for another episode. Yeah. I think, is there anything else you wanted to add, tell people about?
No, I think you guys have asked amazing questions.
Awesome.
And so that basically has summarized it pretty well and just created an excellent awareness, because that's one of the greater tools that one can use. And
Absolutely.
it's because the more people are aware, the
Yeah.
more everybody can work towards protecting our society.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, remember that sharing is caring. So,
In other
words, share this with all your friends.
Amen. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.